Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Chicanery. We are your hosts. I'm Danny, and as always, my lovely co host, JT.
Hello again.
And yes, so we're back after having a little bit of time to quite literally go touch some grass for a couple weeks. Um, back home and back in the saddle to sort of go over everything that we've missed. So, uh, to kick things off, we're going to talk about some IndyCar because Lord knows that there was quite a bit that happened while I was out in the wilderness. So, starting with this silly season stuff, say that 5 times fast. Uh, it was announced that Prema is officially joining the ranks of IndyCar. Um, Callum Isla was announced as one of the drivers, basically in lockstep with the announcements. No word on a second seat as of yet, but it has been heavily speculated that Robert Schwartzman will be in the other seat. And I don't know about you, but I am very happy after the nonsense that he had to deal with at Juncos that Callum has effectively landed on his feet.
I think that's fair to say. He seemed to be fine, like in WEC. But I guess maybe obviously he's switching because obviously the team he's with now, Jota, is switching manufacturers completely, and they're not going with Porsche anymore. So I guess that might be why he's leaving. I know like a couple other drivers are leaving, supposed to be leaving, I guess, but I don't know. I'm not opposed to having him back in IndyCar. I don't doesn't really bother me. I don't really feel a certain type of way, but it's good to see him back regardless.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on, Marcus Armstrong has signed with Meyer Shank for 2025, which was not on my own personal bingo card. I hadn't really even seen much in the way of speculation to even sort of land there. Um, Rinus VK has left Ed Carpenter Racing, and we'll circle back to that one here in a sec. Chip Ganassi is downsizing to 3 entries while next year, and it's unclear exactly what the delineation is going to be, but in all likelihood, it'll probably be Dixon Plo and Kiffin Simpson occupying those seats next year. Um, the rumor mill has been spinning hard and fast about Logan Sargent to IndyCar. Of course, there was some chatter about him ending up at Prema, but now that seems to have cooled off a bit. He did a test with Meyer Shank at a Thermal Club, which also fuels that just a little bit. So, or it's doing a test rather, because it'll be in November. But yeah, so we'll see sort of what happens there. Um, but to circle back to ECR, um, Alexander Rossi is going to be there alongside Christian Rasmussen for 2025 with the eponymous Ed Carpenter himself, effectively being a one-off third entry for the Indy 500. Again, we've talked about it on some previous shows, but not lots of will he, won't he's, where is he going to end up? Lots of bizarrely cryptic tweets about plans, and all of that to end up at ECR for 2025. So I guess I'll kind of take the temperature of the room. How are we feeling about that?
I don't really think ECR is. Obviously, I don't believe ECR is as competitive as a team as McLaren is, but I mean, I guess it's better than nothing because he was kind of running out of options like pretty quickly at this point. So And people were thinking that he was not going to be an IndyCar like altogether. So, I mean, it's an option. I mean, it's not the best option, but I mean, at this point, it's like it is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. And I had kind of a similar thought. I mean, again, we talked about this. I think the last time we did an IndyCar show, that I had kind of likened Alexander Rossi's his saga to Carlos Sainz's in F1. Same thing, all of the back and forth with various teams, all of that to sign for Williams. All of this, end up at ECR. Again, both not on paper, not great options. If anything, I would argue Rossi is maybe a little worse off because I don't foresee ECR having a similar potential upward trajectory as opposed to some signs at Williams that suggests, yeah, maybe. But yes, but much the same. Kind of running out of options. It's like, okay, well, where on earth do you go? So we'll see how. I guess we'll just have to see how it shakes out and how Rossi gets on in 25. But moving on to further stuff, IndyCar. There's some chatter that IndyCar might be adding a Dallas street race to the calendar, which could be kind of fun. Um, for what it's worth, I do believe IndyCar has run a Dallas street course in the past.
I think it was with Champ Car. It wasn't IndyCar, but it was like pre like split or like I don't know something like that. Like pretty long ago when it was a thing.
Yeah. Well, let's see. I'm gonna look this up real quick to see if I can
Technically,
find.
an article came out saying that they're going to add the street race, like it's confirmed, I guess, in like 2026, and it's supposed to be around like the Cowboys Stadium.
Oh, fun. Okay. Yeah, let's see. Let's see. Having a look. Because I'm curious, because this was not something I, probably should have looked into before recording. But my yeah, it was. You're absolutely right. It looks like it was. Yeah, definitely it was pre-split. That yeah, there was a Dallas street race. I'm like, I had a vague recollection of something. I spent lots of time during the lockdowns watching old races. I'm like, I feel like we've done this before, and yeah, I guess kind of. Um, but yeah, so I mean, I guess it'll be curious to see, when we get a formal, proper announcement where, sort of where this race falls, in the calendar. $10
I
says it.
would hope that it would take the spot of where the Texas races were, and you won't have like that weird gap between like the like St. Pete race and then like Long Beach, I guess. I mean, technically that gap was filled by Thermal Club this year, but I mean, Thermal Club was that, and it really was not all that good. And I would honestly prefer anything but Thermal Club fill that gap.
Yeah, and you took the words right out of my mouth. I was thinking that it would slot in for the, basically, yeah, where Texas TMS used to hang out. And yes, I mean, we've talked about it before, so certainly if you haven't listened to it, you should give it a go. We covered the Thermal Club race, but the cliff notes to that is that it was an absolute snoozer of a race, and by God, I don't want to ever see that again. Um,
Like, I
but
don't care if this Dallas race turns out to be like a whole combination of like the Detroit race that was like the IndyCar Detroit race and the IMSA Detroit race, or like the like Nashville street circuit, like the old layout, or I guess the original layout before they were supposed to change it, but the change never happened, or even like Macau. Like, I don't care. It can be as completely chaos and is like as much of a wreck fest. I just like anything but Thermal Club. Like that is just how much I'm against Thermal Club is like a whole concept as a race, especially even now that next season it's becoming a points race. It's like even more. It's like anything but that. I don't care how bad this street race is. I just cannot. No, I'm anti-thermal club.
Yeah, no, same. I am right there with you. I did not enjoy it, and yes, I'm not happy that it is. They saw the incredible reception of Thermal Club by just about everybody, and decided, hey, it would be a good idea to make it a points paying race. Like, ugh. But actually, that's a brilliant segue into further stupidity from IndyCar leadership. Um, and that is that brief sort of brouhaha. I guess that would have been during Milwaukee, um, where Mark Miles. So actually, before I'm getting ahead of myself already, so let's set the stage a little bit. Around this period, actually, I think a little bit before then. My sense of time is a little skewed because I was on vacation, but it was officially. I think NASCAR had officially made their announcement about a Mexico City race, and certainly, basically everybody was like, "Wow, that's really really neat." You've got NASCAR, Formula E, Formula One, all basically run a race in that stadium in Mexico City. Um, and everybody was like, okay, IndyCar, well, why no Mexico City? Because of course, rather famously, Pato Award is Mexican, and everybody's like, well, it'd be cool. And uh, Mark Miles was kind of in his feelings about this one. Talking about how we weren't going to be able to sell tickets, and Pato wasn't a big enough, popular enough driver, which is wild given that, at least anecdotally, Pato Award is probably the most popular driver in the series. Does IndyCar actually truly keep track of those things, like the way like NASCAR does?
They did a fan survey back in like 2022 where I went back and looked at that, and Pato I think was like second or third in like the rankings when they like ran all the like stats and the data about like who was the favorite driver. I forgot who was like first, but he was up there. He was up there with like Elio was also a pretty popular driver.
Hmm.
Um, but I think he was second um in that whole thing, which was like kind of weird because it's like, okay, the data your own series collected like a couple of years ago says like is completely contrary to what you're saying, so whatever. But I mean, and I'm sure if you went back and collected data from people like at the end of this season in 2024, I'm sure you would probably see a similar thing. Um, you would probably see Pato still either like the second most favorite driver or first. I'm sure David Malukas would probably be pretty up there too because those are like the main drivers that I see a lot of people rep and a lot of people have them as like their profile pictures and like all that and are constantly posting stuff about them. So he's pretty popular. So like obviously Mark Miles doesn't know what he's talking about, but hey, grass is green, sky is blue. So like I mean nobody's really shocked, but it just was kind of like stupid and kind of just like, well, like clearly you don't even read or even like engage with any of the stuff your own series does because it's like your point like your what you said is like objectively wrong and it can be proven that it's objectively wrong because like even though the data is only it is old, it is 2 years old, that's not that long ago, and it's not like the popularity of Pato has gone down. It's I would say it's gone up actually, so I don't know.
Yeah, it was weird. A very odd set of comments, and to your point, certainly looking over the notes, you brought up a decent point in that maybe he was a little grouchy that he had effectively been outfoxed by NASCAR of all series, which it takes real skill to have that happen, or maybe that's a lack thereof.
And
Um,
probably also that somebody pointed out, like somebody wrote an article, I think it was like Elizabeth Blackstock. She posted an article That was talking about how Mark Miles had actually been promising a Mexico race for IndyCar for like years and still has yet to deliver on it. So, for all intents and purposes, he could also be salty about the fact that he's getting grilled by like literally everybody. Like that was like one of the few times that I had seen everybody like on a united front within like the IndyCar fandom coming to collectively grill him like that whole weekend, because honestly it was just like literally he should just never say. I would have paid him to just not say anything for the rest of that weekend or maybe even the rest of the season, because it was just like literally stupid statement after stupid statement. And it's just like him talking about also that having that, I guess, like being able to sell 10,000 plus tickets was a good starting point for like the Milwaukee race, which is like that's not even half the capacity that the Milwaukee Mile can hold. I don't believe. I think it's like 30,000 or something. But it's like part of this is like, I mean, sure, I guess like you want a good like baseline, but at the same time, like you have to promote the race. So it's like you talking about, well, we're only going to be able to sell X amount of tickets. And then even that bar, that baseline is also very low, which is like, again, like I said, having a baseline is good, but you also don't want it too low, like where you're basically lowballing yourself. It's like you have to promote it, which is like that's the reason why it's like you can only it's like, well, we can only sell 10,000 tickets. Well, the reason why you can only sell 10,000 tickets is because, well, you didn't promote the race. Maybe if you put more effort on promoting it, it might do well. There might be people that show up. You never know. I mean, the attendance seemed decent throughout the weekend, but it's just like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and this is a thing we talked about it before. Again, well, we've done enough of these shows now that I can just point you to the episode we did just before Christmas last year in the off season to kind of basically a state of IndyCar episode ostensibly, and yeah, it's just self-inflicted bullet wound after self-inflicted bullet wound with the series. You get fun venues, they don't do anything. They don't do enough to hold on to some of the old fan favorite venues. Um, because of the way that they structure their schedule, they are for the ovals, particularly a lot of the super speedways. They're at the mercy of NASCAR for a lot of those, and it's like guys, come on.
Which, I mean, to IndyCar's credit, I guess, or just one of the rare few times I would defend IndyCar. Like the reason why the Dallas Street Race is a thing is because the Texas race is no longer like viable, at
Mhm.
least at Texas Motor Speedway, mainly because like NASCAR changed their dates for the Texas race, and that's why like it now conflicts. So like to some degree, the loss of the Texas Motor Speedway race was not like IndyCar's fault completely.
No, it wasn't, and yeah, we've talked about that before. And certainly, if this goes through, then yes, it will be a good way to sort of solve that problem. And yes, absolutely, props to IndyCar for figuring something out. Um, but but yeah, like I said, otherwise it's just kind of thing after thing, and to sit here and on a basically a random ass race weekend to sit here and basically pick a fight with like everybody is just colossally stupid. Um, and it's funny, and even Pato Award wasn't really having it because he posted a screenshot of a billboard in Milwaukee that was advertising NASCAR because trucks, I do believe, were at Milwaukee as well, and it said, "quote Speaking of billboards, guess who isn't on one?" And then even since then, I think there might have even been within the city of Milwaukee. I think there was a billboard that quite literally said just Pato Award on it. Um, I do believe that's popped up since, but
I think there was one that was for it was I think it's just like in somewhere in like Indy or like near like the Speedway in Indianapolis. There's like billboards that popped up like kind of like making fun of like the whole situation. I think it says like Pato Who on it. And then like I'd seen somebody um who like I had tweeted one of my mutuals like replied with like a tweet with a picture of a billboard that was advertising the race, but it was only it seemed to be like there was just only one and it was in like some vicinity of like the track. So there's that. But then there's also like even to like the whole billboard point thing, it's just like it's 2024. Like I genuinely don't believe that companies are spending a large chunk of their marketing budget into advertising shit on billboards. Like there are more effective ways to go about advertising your product or your like event or whatever it is you're trying to get across to people than billboards. So it's like I don't even know why he's talking about billboards when it's like who's even using billboards anyways? Like you like I mean when I went to Nashville and there was a Nashville IndyCar race, I mean, I don't even remember seeing any billboards for the race, but I know there were like little, like, quick, like, pop up and tear down, like, signs for it, but actual proper billboard signage for the race, like, I don't recall seeing that. And the only time that I've ever seen, like, a proper IndyCar billboard was like when I went to Long Beach, like, in like a previous, like, 2 summers ago, and there was like a billboard advertising like the Long Beach Grand Prix. Um, so, and to be honest, that could have been also because like Honda, I think, has a lot of dealerships in Long Beach too. So it was as much as it was an ad for IndyCar for their race and also IMSA, it was also a chance for like Honda to advertise like their cars and their like their shit. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I am in the, backyard of, well, particularly GM and Ford. There's not really a whole lot of billboard advertising that goes on when IndyCar and IMSA roll into Detroit every June. Like, same thing. You get some of the, temporary signage. Particularly once you start getting closer to downtown Detroit, talking about it. But otherwise, nobody really does that. I think the last time I remember seeing a billboard for the Detroit Grand Prix was, at this point, probably at least 10 years ago. I think more than that, though, to be completely honest.
It's probably more effective. It'd probably be more effective marketing for IndyCar to like take like a show car and just put it in the middle of like the Milwaukee airport. If there's a airport there, I'm sure there is. It's a major US city. Just do what they usually do with like every time there's the Indy 500 and they just put an IndyCar, just slap it in the middle of the freaking like Indianapolis airport or like just like this previous like the IMSA race was just like this past weekend or 2 weekends ago. They took like a show car of like a Porsche 963 and just put it in the middle of the freaking airport. And it's like even that is pretty effective at marketing too, just because it's a car and it looks cool and that's gonna get people's attention. So it's like anything but billboards. Even little like I mean again, billboards are kind of irrelevant now. It's like the main thing you would see is like I don't know, like in a lot of major cities, there's like the like screen ads and stuff where it's just like it's got like a screen, a big screen, and then it has like ads scrolling through constantly. It's like something like that. Like buy out some like ad space on those things or something. However, like billboards are not the way to go.
Yeah, no, they're not. But yeah, this was just a very silly and useless brouhaha. And then to cap off this, I don't know, I guess about 48 hours of nonsense. Well, actually, it was a little later in the week than that, to be fair. But so we'll call it 72. Was that Mark was then talking about how, they weren't going back to older tracks. He specifically called out Richmond, effectively saying, we've been there and done that. Um, but then the series, of course, was at Milwaukee, which is a circuit that they hadn't run on for what, the better part of 20 years.
That's why I don't
prior.
understand that comment. Like, it's like, okay, we're not, there's like, we're not going back to old tracks. And you literally are just coming off of a weekend where you went back to an old track that you revived and it was pretty like successful. Honestly, I feel like that comment was like personal to me because I had tweeted during the Milwaukee race that like I felt like if IndyCar did go to Richmond, an IndyCar Richmond race would probably function similarly to like the Milwaukee race. It would probably race the same because it's also a short oval. And then later on, like a couple of days later, he's like, "No, we're not going back to Richmond." It's like, damn, did y'all see the tweet I put out specifically and targeted me and said, "Yeah, you're talking about Richmond, but we're not going back there." Like,
Yeah, it's all very silly and it's funny. Second, Elizabeth Blackstock shout out. She went and compiled effectively a graveyard of everywhere that IndyCar has been and subsequently buggered off for. And sweet Christ, the list is ginormous. And to be fair,
I
some
thought
of
that it was like the Louts ring that was on there too. I'm like, hey, why don't you go hit up DTM, the executives there, and see if they'll let you share a weekend there at the Louts ring with them. I mean, they might say no, but it's worth a shot.
if they know what's good for them, they'll say no. But yeah, no, it was going through, and again, a lot of those circuits are outside of IndyCar's control, as to why. But it's just like, holy smokes. But yeah, no, definitely there's some curious ones in there. But yeah, like I said, that was just a week of absolute nonsense. And it's like, oh my god, would you please shut up? But moving on, this was arguably one of the worst kept secrets within the IndyCar paddock here as of late. But IndyCar officially let the cat that is the charter system out of the bag. So there is a charter system. It's going set to take effect next season. Um, so a chartered entry will be guaranteed a starting position on the grid at every race of the season, except for the Indy 500, which is interesting. We'll circle back to that in a second. And it limits the entry number to 27 cars. Um, and also, the having charters means you'll be eligible for the leader circle payouts as well. Um, so reactions to this was actually more mixed than I anticipated. I figured it would be an everybody disliked that, but that was not actually quite how this panned out in practice. Um, so what do you think?
I mean, I don't really know what to say about this just because, like, the NASCAR charter system is obviously a thing too, and that would be the thing. That would be like the prototype for this, and like, okay, if I know how the NASCAR charter system functions, it can kind of give me an idea of how the IndyCar charter system would function. But I have no idea how the NASCAR charter system functions, and it's been around for I guess a decent while now. But I've yet to figure that out. I don't really know, like, I have yet to find anybody who can like simply, like, in simple terms, like as if they were explaining it to a 5-year-old, like explain the charter system of NASCAR. So like this part of me is like, I don't know how this is gonna go. I mean, and then some people, like, it was also mixed because there were some people that were pointing out that's like, okay, like it might seem redundant to have like the cap be at like 27 cars because you would for some tracks, like I think we're already reaching like the limit for like how many cars you can actually have, so it seems like kind of dumb. But I don't know.
Yeah, I don't love this because, well, frankly, the IndyCar, or no, sorry, not IndyCar, the NASCAR charter system is kind of a mess. I mean, heck, I do believe front row in 2311, they didn't sign on to the new charter. And then there was even some chatter from RFK about feeling like they were effectively bullied into signing, the effectively the ratification of the new charter. So I see lots of ways where this can go very pear-shaped very quickly. Um, cool guaranteed entry spots. All right, fine, whatever. Except for the 500, which is, that's wild because that is the most lucrative race on the calendar by a significant margin. And to have that be the one that nobody's locked into. Now, let me be clear, I think that is a good thing. I think month of May festivities I think is just arguably just as much fun as the Indianapolis 500 itself. And I do think that that magic needs to be preserved, but in a lot of ways I think that fundamentally defeats the purpose of having this whole system in the first place, which is, effectively guaranteed spots, guaranteed money. Um, so we'll we'll have to see how it goes. The biggest issue here is that Prema doesn't have any charters. So again, they won't be eligible for leader circle payouts. And again, depending on kind of how this ends up working, this could significantly limit their scope in the future. I don't know how long this is going to run for. I didn't see anything that specified, but this could that could potentially be problematic for Prema and anybody else who potentially could be looking to come in. It feels like we could be marching towards the closed shop mentality that we've talked a lot about in Formula One here, particularly with the nightmare of an Andretti saga. But except, well, IndyCar, at least they actually put it in writing. So,
You were talking about how long the charter system runs. It says in the article, like it runs through 2031.
oh, good. Sweet Christ, that's a long time.
I mean, it is. And then I don't know. I just don't even know if this is even like something that IndyCar really needs to be like that worried about. Like honestly, it's like we still need a third OEM. Like there's only two OEMs in the freaking whole series, and you have one threatening to leave. Um, Maybe work on refining the hybrid system over the off season too, because I don't really know if that was all that smooth during the season. So, I mean, there's other things we could be focused on, I feel like, and I just don't know. I don't know about this. And funny enough, like kind of the same thing that happened with NASCAR, how you had like a couple of teams kind of hold out on like signing the agreement. Same thing happened here. I think there were like at least two like IndyCar team owners who were kind of like holding out on signing it. And received a phone call from like Penske to like sign it or whatever. But I don't know. And then there's like they have the Dale coin rule, which is basically just like the team is limited to only being able to use a maximum of three drivers per entry, which is like, I guess RIP to the random Dale coin signings, the wild card Dale coin signings, which were kind of funny and they were kind of fun to be honest. And it could have some ramifications for like Indy Next, because you would have a lot of like Indy Next drivers would get signed to Dale coin and race with them for like a couple of races. And to be honest, there are some people that I really wouldn't know who they were if it weren't for Dale Coyne like randomly signing them to drive for the team for like a weekend. Like I would have no idea who Toby Sowery was if that never happened. So I mean, there might be potential like consequences for that.
Yeah, we'll have to just kind of see how all this shakes out. I don't think that this is going to go anywhere good, but well, I've been wrong before, so yeah, we'll see. Um, uh, moving on. And this one was very funny. It was the afternoon of September 18th. RLLs, their HQ, they got raided by the feds, which just saying that is amusing. But yeah, obviously, given that this is the subject to literally a federal investigation, details are a bit scarce, but allegedly due to intellectual property theft. Um, Apparently, a former Andretti employee who has since become employed by RLL, uh, took some information that they shouldn't have over. But that's really about all we know right now. So, very obviously developing story. Certainly if there's anything funny, then we'll bring the updates. But I can't remember who I initially saw that tweet from about the picture of like federal agents in like full tack gear going into RLL's headquarters. And it's like, oh goodness, but yes, very funny. Um, but speaking of Andretti, Michael Andretti is leaving the Andretti ownership role. That's a bit of a tongue twister there. Um, but again, there's not really a whole lot going on. Um, but neither has the organization itself made any comments specifically. But it is worth pointing out that there's a sort of sub entity. When doing a little bit of reading about this myself, I do believe it's called Andretti Acquisitions or something. And
I read somewhere that it was like the group 1001 or something. They had like recently bought a stake into like Andretti or something. And I think it was with the whole like Andre to F1 thing, I guess, which maybe that has something to do with all of this, but there's very minimal information.
yeah, but I guess my point is that just some sort of acquisitions arm within Andretti Global has found itself with Michael and Zach Brown apparently aligning together, which is curious. But no, there's not a whole lot of information about anything. I mean, this is some pretty surface level stuff that everybody has and nothing deeper yet. So again, file that one under developing, and certainly we'll get back to you when it should something further materialize from all this. But with that, I guess time to chat about well, let's get to the races. 'Cause of course, we've had two Milwaukee races and the IndyCar season finale at Nashville. Um, so I guess should get into it. So I guess the first thing is talking about Milwaukee. On balance over the weekend, that weekend, good races or not?
I mean, I thought they were decent for a IndyCar. I mean, I don't know. Like, I kind of suspected that it might not have been that great just because, like, the other short oval races, like Iowa, was notably not great. Um, Gateway was all right, but barring all the shenanigans that happened at the end, but Gateway was like all right, but Milwaukee was decent in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm broadly of the same opinion. Now the middle stint in race one, that mid stint was kind of kind of nothing happened. Because again, I was out of town, so I watched these races back a little later, and I can't remember. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry, Arthur. I can't remember exactly how you phrase it, but basically the nap test. I did not off there for about 10 minutes during that second stint in race one. Um, but yeah, broadly speaking, I think they were fine. Race two was kind of bananas. We'll get to that. Um, but to sort of start out race one, Grosjean just like lost his mind over the radio about fuel saving. Apparently, there was a bit of a miscommunication about sort of what they were doing in that opening stint, and Grosjean just went bananas over the radio about it, and the team having to basically tell him to calm the what down. And it's like, okay, excellent. Um, but it was pretty quiet until unfortunately Cat Leg went for a spin on lap 84. Kept it out of the barriers, but Yep, that would bring out a caution. And then again, we would kind of settle in, but then Newgarden and Ericsson came together, um, which was a curious one. And that was at lap 148. It's funny. Ericsson kind of piled the blame onto Newgarden, saying that Joseph came down, and I'm like, not really. Newgarden was running up on basically the higher line, and just Ericsson just kind of Leroy Jenkins did up the inside, and was like practically half a car width, a full car width up off the yellow line. It's like you had more space to try to make that pass work, buddy. But just Marcus Ericsson things, I guess. And then we would get another caution actually pretty shortly thereafter, because Colton Herta's wheel came off as he was leaving the pits, and it almost took out. Was that Alexander Rossi? I think that was.
I
He
don't
was
remember
trying.
who that was.
Yeah, I feel like it was one of them. I'm almost positive it was one of the McLarens. I think it was Rossi. I'll have to go back and re-fact check that. So you may hear an editor's note cut in. But yeah, but somebody almost got bonked by the wheel flying up the circuit. But all of this would end in Pato winning race 1, with Connor Daly finishing on the podium, which was certainly not on my bingo card. I think this is his second career podium, if I remember correctly.
No,
Which, yeah, and that was kind of the point that I was getting to. Which, second career podium, even third, however many it's been. It's a single digit, it's a low single digit figure, which for Connor Daly being in IndyCar for what feels like probably about 15 years at this point is an amusing stat. With most of that, I guess about half of that being a full-time drive. But yeah, so race 1, fairly middling. But race 2 is where things got a bit spicy. We didn't even go green yet. Whereas Pelos broke out on basically leaving the pits. I don't remember if there was ever an official reason listed for what happened there. If it was like a
I
gearbox.
couldn't find it. I couldn't find anything, but I know people were speculating that it was an issue with the hybrid unit, but I remember that it specifically was not an issue with the hybrid unit, it was something else, but I don't know what that something else was.
Yeah, given I guess the things that tend to break on Indy cars, I would reckon it was probably something driveline related, maybe gearbox that went pop. But yes. But then we had even more drama before, I guess, the true race start. Because to be fair, we had some laps count down while they were rescuing Pelot's stranded car. But right when we were on the start, basically it was waved off because race control didn't feel like the back of the pack was formed up enough, if I remember correctly. But Linus Lundqvist, I guess, just didn't get that and drove into Marcus Armstrong, and it basically concertinaed him into just Newgarden and put Newgarden out on the spot. And Pato O'Ward did very well to not collect all three of them and just had some minor front wing damage. And
yeah, drama on an IndyCar race restart. Where have I seen that before?
and involving a Penske, no less. Yeah. But yeah, this is a thing, and I guess I don't know if this begs the question of if does there need to be some tweaking to maybe the way particularly IndyCar handles waving off restarts, because yes, this seems to
I don't know. Like, I feel like, again, like, when you say baby, it makes me feel like, okay, like, are we like this incompetent that we can't manage this as adults? Like, I feel like as adults and as professional racing drivers, I feel like we should be able to manage this correctly, but apparently not. So, you know what? If we can't manage it, then yeah, maybe we need some babying because, I mean, it does happen very frequently and it's kind of annoying at this point. I mean, maybe annoying is like, I don't know. I just and crazy enough, like I think I forgot to include it, but they actually did do a little bit of like tweaking with like the rules or whatever after the gateway shenanigans, and they put in a physical restart zone like on the track, like they marked it somewhere on like at Milwaukee, I think. Like they put it on the track, which is funny because I said that they should have done that last, like literally when we went over the Gateway episode. I'm like, yeah, they probably should like mark it on the track, and they did it. But you know what? I mean, I guess it really didn't matter because it didn't really seem to help because well, you still had a crash on the restart. Um, Technically the start, but since there was still drama, it's like it didn't help. And yeah, maybe we just need to like rework the whole thing because I don't know what it'll take. It just like something's not working. I don't know what's not working, but something clearly needs to be done.
Yeah, agreed. Because I've had this feeling, the last couple of times where we have a restart waved off, and so folks start going, then folks start checking up, and then again it creates this concertina effect, and somebody just misses it entirely, and then uh bowling balls their way through like three different cars.
Which I mean,
And
I think was what happened in this instance. It was somebody didn't get the memo that the restart was being waved off, and that's what caused like all this like drama. But I don't know.
yeah, yeah, like I said, pretty sure that was I'm almost positive it was Lundquist, because initially I thought it was Armstrong being an idiot. And then, yeah, it was. I thought Armstrong was being a doofus, and I was like, "Oh, wait, no, you got collected by Lundquist." And like I said, it resulted in Newgarden being taken out. But like I said, it took Pato a while to shut it down too, because he
Well,
very
it wouldn't
near.
matter because his car later just fucking died or something. I don't know what happened to it. It just died.
Yeah, I do believe that was a gearbox failure, according to Pato. And it's so funny because you can, if you listen to the radio transmission on the broadcast, he was like, "Oh man, really?" It was very funny. He was upset. Um, but in like arguably the most wholesome way that you can be for your car having a mechanical failure while you're running pretty well. But we also had a caution not too long thereafter because of David Malukas was slow on track with a mechanical failure. I don't believe it was ever specified quite what happened to him, but yeah, his car broke and brought out a caution. For the first time in a little bit, we got the obligatory Stingray Rob caution, and this was at lap 118, because he had a spin in the exact same spot that Catherine Legg did the previous day. Um, and then we would have Ray Hall getting annihilated by Rasmussen, and points for arguably one of the least whiny post crash Ray Hall interviews I've seen in a while. I mean, he was definitely a bit whiny, but he like actually ended that on a semi positive note of, well, the kid is young and I hope he figures it out, which I'm like, huh? So I don't know.
Maybe he's
Maybe,
changing as a person.
yeah, I was like, maybe
I
Graham
don't
is
doubt it,
maturing in
but
his old age. But yeah, it was I was pleasantly surprised. We had another Stingray Rob caution with about 12 laps to go. I don't even remember where he binned it there. Um, but Scott McLaughlin win would win race 2. Um, oh, and actually there was one that completely slipped my mind, was that Will Power just went for a random spin. I think that was out of 2 about halfway through the race. Um and which was wild because because I know there was a little bit of alternate strategy things that was going on at that period, and I think he was actually spun with the effective race lead, which was like, huh, okay, but that is important, because with the day that Pelot was having, if Power could have kept it together, he would have actually been in control of the championship heading into Nashville, but he did not. So he did not. But yes, that does bring us to Nashville Speedway, or the Big Machine Music City Grand Prix, which is a very silly name.
It's just the name from the old race, like as if it was supposed to be like on the street circuit, because it's like it's not a Grand Prix anymore. Really, it was like they should just named it out of how many miles that track they were running on the track, but they just kept it as the Music City Grand Prix. But hey, whatever.
Yeah. Um, but of course, good race or not.
I mean, it was better than I anticipated it to be because my expectations were not high for this race at all, especially since every clip I saw them doing testing here, they were running with the shorter arrow, the baby arrow, like the baby oval arrow kit. And I'm like, why are we doing this? I thought Nashville was a big enough track that you could run the big boy oval setup, but it was okay. With the exception of the fact that there was like a massive bump in turn 4 and they never did anything about it. I'm like, and it caused a decent amount of people to like spin and crash into like the barriers. And it had happened at least 3 times, like throughout both practice and qualifying. And the series just never did anything about it. I'm like, are they gonna do anything about that? And then the race started, and race day came, and no update, no, hey, we're doing this adjustment. So I'm like, yeah, I guess they just said fuck everybody then.
Yeah, pretty much. Um, the the footage of that big old dip in turn 4 was kind of wild. It's like, okay, surely they're gonna fix that, right? And then they just didn't. I'm like, huh, okay, this is a decision. But yeah, but the race ended up being decent. A little deflating, given that Will lost the championship basically on lap like 3 because his belts weren't fastened. But otherwise, it wasn't a half bad race. You had some close racing, kind of scattered about the place. Um, and yeah, no, pleasantly surprised. And I don't think anybody in the race died on that turn 4 bump. I mean, Rosenquist would lose a tire, which would bring out a caution at like lap 50 something. Catherine would go around on lap 89, and Erickson would end up in the wall at lap 135. But like I said, as far as I recall, no deaths on the bump, which is kind of incredible, to be honest, given the amount of crashes in practice because of that bump. Um, but it all culminated in Colton Herta finally notching a oval race win. And Pelot would basically end up strolling away with the championship after all, um, because of Will's misfortune. It's funny. I just for a little bit of chatter, with racing content creators, but as a channel FP1 Will that I really really like, and I think the opening line was the IndyCar championship was decided by a fucking seatbelt. I do believe was the line, and he's absolutely correct. A little bit of a bummer, but yeah, it's the way it
Hey,
goes.
what a better message to people than to say wear your seatbelt. I don't know.
I mean, honestly, yeah. Yeah, because I do believe it was the shoulder belts that came undone, and that was part of why it was so bad. Because Hinch on the broadcast outed himself a little bit, but apparently lap belts can come undone, and sometimes they'll just deal with it and not have them properly tightened. But I guess the shoulder belts are a much bigger issue. But yes, so congratulations. Alex Palou does it again. It's his third championship in 4 years, if I remember correctly.
I don't know. Like I
Something
feel
like
like
that.
I thought it was like his only like second. Like I don't know.
Yeah, need to check that. But at any rate, I guess now with the season being over, well, time to reflect. So I guess sort of what are the broad feelings of the season as a whole? Good, bad, meh?
I mean, it was decent, barring like the amount of drama that was that entrenched this season. But I thought it was decent, with some exceptions, obviously.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I broadly feel the same. I think this certainly wasn't a bad season. I think it was, I guess, just on pure on track product. I think it was a little bit better than last year, given that this championship was run much closer. But then, like I said, just all the nonsense off track this year gets. Well, I mean, we've talked about it before. It's fatiguing after a while. But I guess to get a little bit more granular, best race of the season, worst race of the season.
I don't know what the best race was, but the worst race for sure was Thermal Club. Nothing is beating Thermal Club as like the worst race. I mean, yes, St. Pete was pretty like not that great because it was just so lackluster and like just a complete snooze fest. But like that's kind of how St. Pete is. Some years it's very chaotic, such as last year, and some years it's a complete snooze fest. So really it's like a hit or miss. But like Thermal Club, yeah, no.
Yeah, I completely agree. Thermal Club comfortably takes the cake for the worst race of the season. Um, yeah, I couldn't have been any more bored. In fact, well, we talked about it on the episode, but I'm pretty sure I fell asleep during one of the. I think it was during the second race. Actually, I nodded off because I ended up having to go back and rewatch that to record. But but yeah, so yeah, best race of the season. That's tough because Detroit was just ultra chaotic, and that can be fun. But yeah, it turned into kind of a mess. Toronto was kind of fun. I didn't mind Toronto. Portland wasn't bad either. So yeah, I don't know what the best race was really, and we would have to spend entirely too long to sit and kind of think about it. But yeah, definitely Thermal Club was the worst race of the year, and I am absolutely dreading going back next year.
Especially as a points paying race. I just don't know what prompted them to do that.
I don't either, and I would love to give whoever greenlit that, well, actually, whoever had the idea in the first place, and then whichever series of goofballs that greenlit that, I would love to get them all in a room and give them a very stern talking to, because it's like nobody wanted anything to do with Thermal Club, certainly not from a fan perspective.
You know what? I'll give Barber to be the best race, just for the mannequin falling off the little bridge thing, the
Oh yeah,
walkway
that's
thing,
right.
just
Uh-huh.
because it was so funny and random.
Yep, I can endorse that. Um, but yes. So I guess to kind of keep on this theme, teams and drivers that were alternatingly impressive slash disappointing.
For me, like impressive, I was pretty impressed with Nolan Siegel, considering the fact that he was kind of just thrown in there like uh mid season. I thought he did pretty well in a lot of races. Same with Teo Porcher. I thought he was pretty impressive too. It's kind of sad that he kind of just got like, you know, they kind of felt he was kind of disposable and kind of just. I mean, they put him in for a to drive for like as a replacement for Rossi when he injured his like wrist or like thumb or whatever it was. But I was pretty impressed with them. As far as it goes for disappointing, most notably, who I consider to be very disappointing this season was Marcus Ericsson. I mean, I felt like for most of the season, I was waiting for him to do something, and he just never did. Especially since he was in Andretti and like, sure, going from like Andretti, he went from Chip Ganassi racing to Andretti, which like I feel like that's a pretty even like step. Like both teams are pretty competitive teams, like they're front runners usually. I mean, Andretti, like at least last year, I know Andretti had a lot of issues with being consistent on a lot of tracks, specifically ovals. They just were not too good on ovals for whatever reason. They just were never able to like wrap their heads around like whatever strategy or whatever setup they had going on with ovals, but they seem to have that figured out this year and it's going to be a lot better for them. Um, but I just like I was very disappointed by his performance this season. I kind of just felt very underwhelmed. Um, and then also like Kiffin Simpson. I mean, I feel kind of bad saying this because he is a rookie driver, so it's like some of this you could chalk up to him being a rookie and not having figured everything out yet. But um, I mean, technically his Indy Next or Indy Lights results, I mean, kind of showed that like maybe he was not ready for the step up to IndyCar. Um, because I mean, and it kind of blows me that he's probably going to be in the other Chip Ganassi seat as opposed to Linus Lundqvist, who has done way more than he has in the entire season. I mean, Linus Lundqvist did more than Kiffin Simpson has done. Like he did more in like the span of like 2 or 3 races than Kiffin Simpson has done the whole season. Um, and obviously, like everybody knows, like he's pretty talented. I kind of would hate for him to be out of IndyCar completely, especially having to go through a lot to even just like get in IndyCar in the first place. Hopefully, I mean, he can be with Dale Coyne, which is kind of a downgrade from Chip Ganassi, but again, it's better than not being in IndyCar altogether. Um, but I just not too impressed with Kiffin Simpson. Also, I'm equally not impressed with Christian Rasmussen, considering the fact that he was pretty dominant in Indy Next. Like, I mean, he was like wiping the floor at everybody in Indy Next and then completely flops in IndyCar, which I found to be very confusing. Not gonna lie, I didn't expect that. I thought, I wasn't expecting him to be, going all out and, getting wins and podiums and stuff. Cause again, he is a rookie. And he is also at Ed Carpenter Racing, which also again, not very much of a competitive team either. But I did expect him to not be like crashing every other race, which just seemed to be the case for him. But I don't know how you feel.
Yeah, so certainly for drivers that so for impressive, I was actually very impressed with the way that David Malukas was able to really rebound from the injury. It's a case of I don't think the results are quite the whole picture in this instance because if you look, it's kind of like it's pretty middling. But when you consider that, of course, he was out and then he very much got thrown back in. He got the drive with Meyer Shank and was back in the deep end. And, I think we talked about this when he made his return, but certainly, the journey for him, healing in his hand and full mobility and blah, 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 that's going to continue. It's, just because he's back in the car, it's not, oh, it's healed, we're done. It's just good enough that a doctor said, yeah, okay, fine, you idiot, go race. Um, so all things considered, I was very impressed with certainly with his comeback. Um, also, I was actually impressed with, and again, this may sound kind of silly, but with Colton Herta, last year was very much kind of up and down, back and forth, sort of year, and he seems to have really stabilized. Lots of, just, okay, well, we may not quite have the pace to win today. And they'll just, he quietly brought home, P4, P5, P6. I think he ended up finishing second in the championship, if I remember correctly.
I think so.
Which is, yeah, it was a much more stable year this year. But yeah, so that was cool. As
Yeah,
for
I guess he got his mojo back or something. I don't know.
that's really what it kind of feels like because last year was not good. Certainly not by the standards of Colton or Andretti. I mean, I know there are some teams further down the grid that would kill for even, last year Colton Herta results. And I think that's fair enough, but given the standards of that organization and at least what it positions itself as, yeah, last year for Colton just wasn't that great. Um, but this year, but yeah, this year good. But as for disappointing, yeah, I agree with you. Definitely the rookies, Rasmussen particularly. Given the way that, like you said, he slayed all comers in Indy Next and then just bended every week um, in IndyCar proper. It's like, what happened? Again, I understand when you start talking about raw car performance, he's not going to have that. That's fair. But even in then, it's like, okay, well, you can just, have like something that vaguely resembles racecraft. And apparently that was too difficult.
I might be saying something controversial, but in my opinion, just this year's cohort of rookie drivers in IndyCar just collectively wasn't great. Whether it be Christian Rasmussen or like Kiffin Simpson or even Tom Blomqvist, which I can't really say that much about his rookie performance in IndyCar because he didn't even complete the whole fucking season. So we're really not really working with too much here, which I mean I'm still kind of disappointed about because I really would have liked to see how well he would have done in IndyCar. I feel like he might have done well if he was given the time. But overall, Linus Lundqvist was probably the best rookie, which I'm glad he got. I think rookie of the year, rookie of the season, whatever it is. But yeah, just overall, not great. Maybe next season will be great. I don't know, barring on how many rookies there are in the field next
Yeah, no.
season.
Yeah, I completely agree. This year's rookie class was pretty stinky. Yeah, I wasn't impressed really with any of them at all. Of course they're going to be first year jitters, blah 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 blah. But yeah, but they all kind of sucked. But also actually somebody who did disappoint me, and this one this might land me with some flaming pitchforks at my front door when this episode goes live. But all in all, I had the very distinct feeling of being disappointed actually in Scott Dixon's season. It started so strong, putting on that absolute clinic at St. Pete, where it just felt like apparently, he had, some hidden like 4 extra gallons of fuel. I mean, that is peak Scott Dixon, but it just
Everybody, I wish I had the same fuel saving ability as Scott Dixon when it comes to driving just around in my own car because I would save so much money on gas.
yeah, it was bananas to watch him do that. And like I said, that's just Scott Dixon. But then as the season progressed, it felt like just fell more and more and more kind of off the pace. I don't
He was
know.
actually running out of fuel.
Yes,
Shockingly.
running out of fuel, then some, I think was it Portland he got collected by, was that Pietra, I think? Um so some
Yeah,
of the yeah, so there were some issues and like DNFs that were very much not his fault. But yeah, it's just like what happened? What seemed like, he could potentially be, a title contender, particularly kind of in the first third of the season. And it just kind of amounted to nothing. I would have to go and look and see where he actually ended up finishing up. But yeah, if you look at where we ended up at the end of the season versus certainly the way Scott kicked it off, it's like, huh. So that was, I guess, maybe less disappointing and more just kind of a bummer. Um,
I don't know. A rookie driver that I completely forgot was even a rookie was Pietro Fittipaldi. I completely forgot he was even in this series until just popped up in my mind. But
yeah,
again, goes right along with what I was saying. This whole rookie cohort this year just wasn't good. It just was not great.
Yeah, yeah, same thing. Because I was like, arguably his most famous moment this year was driving like a bit of a melon and like wreck avoidance, like -20 in that attribute, and just driving into Scott Dixon. Um, but yeah, no. So yeah, like I said, so definitely collectively the rookie class this year just was awful, and that definitely is the most disappointing for me. Um, but so I guess what about, do you have any teams that fall into either camp that stand out to you particularly?
I mean, I feel like not aside from like the usual teams that I find to be disappointing, which is like RLL's kind of disappointing sometimes, with the exception of Christian Lundgaard. ECR not really. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. Most of the time they're not. If they are there, it was usually Renus VK who was able to like put up some decent results. But I mean, I don't know. I Even McLaren, actually, to be honest, was kind of not there this season, if I'm being real. Like, they, for whatever reason, kind of had the same deal. Like, they were kind of like on the same energy that Andretti was last season, where they were just all over the place, very much inconsistent. Like, Arrow McLaren was pretty inconsistent this year, I feel like. There were some races where it's like, it's great, we're cooking. And then other races it's like, there was one race where I think they got like straight DNFs across the board, like everybody didn't finish the race, and it was just like, I don't know, they felt very much like not there this season either. At least considering the fact that, like, if you take into account the type of team that McLaren is, like they're usually supposed to be like a top field team in IndyCar. So yeah, I don't really. I was kind of disappointed with them too.
Yeah, again, as opposed to, good teams versus, or impressive v disappointing, because I guess that's the litmus that we're using here. Um, yeah, like you said, it's all the kind of usual suspects that tend to filter into either camp. But yeah, McLaren is definitely actually is kind of a standout for me this year in disappointing, because like you said, it was just kind of all overshot. You would have some weekends where, and that's the thing, you didn't really even have very many weekends where everybody was consistently fast. Sometimes it would be just Rossi or just Pato, um, or actually even one race where it looked like it, might just be, well, whoever was in the 7 car, be it Porsche, Ilott, um, Siegel, kind of whoever, but all 3 cars were never consistently quick. Um, but all 3 cars were frequently, all of them were slow. It's just, yeah, it was not a great season. And definitely for a team that, same thing, kind of, to bring back the Andretti comparisons, that positions itself as being kind of a top flight team in the series. This was a distinctly mid-pack performance. And truth be told, you have the occasional good, Meyershank or um, Foyt performance. And then suddenly, okay, well, now you're looking at the back half of the grid, and it's like, that's not really how that's supposed to work. Um, so yeah, that's probably the only real standout for me in either camp, is probably just McLaren kind of sucking this year.
Yeah, I guess another team or like driver I would say was actually pretty impressive was Felix Rosenquist. I was pretty impressed with his performance at Meyershank this year, to be honest.
Yeah, that's a good point. I had forgotten about Felix, but I do think you're absolutely right. Um, but I guess with that, what do we think we're going into? What do we think next season is going to bring?
I mean, I would hope maybe less drama than this season, even though as much as I love drama, it's like maybe less of that. I don't know. I mean, and then I don't, again, still don't really know about this charter system thing, but I don't know, kind of just have to see. Um, Again, I would really like to see IndyCar do some sort of reworking of like their race start procedures, that whole thing, because like I'm kind of getting tired of having shenanigans happen every time it's a race start or restart, and it's just like it's getting tired. It's getting old at this point. It's like at this point, like, okay, fine. You don't want to do any adjustments because it's the middle of the season or the season's almost over, and it's like, it's kind of pointless at that point. But now the season's over and there's a bit of a break. There's an off season. Why not give that a look over and fix it? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess my probably the one thing, my one expectation is probably that IndyCar is going to find some way to have this newfangled charter system kind of blow up in their face. Um, Beyond that, that's really about it. And yeah, actually, same less drama would be cool. At the best of the time, I don't think I quite have the appetite for it that you do. And so this year it was just, and again, we've talked about it a lot in previous, episodes, between this and then all of the, well, frankly, bullshit in Formula One this year. It's just, I'm tired, boss. Um, and I would like to have less of this going forward.
Also, maybe like I guess this might fall under the category of less drama, but less of mid-season driver swaps too, maybe because I don't know. Like I don't know. Which some of that I understand why it was done this season was because it was the leader circle and they were worried about trying to get the bands in the leader circle. And that was the main driving force behind that. But I'm like, I don't know. I would really just like to see people's asses stay in the seat. You sign them, their asses in the seat the whole season, with the exception of, okay, they injure themselves or they're unwell and they can't race. You have somebody fill in for them that weekend or whatever. Fine. But like, I don't know. Sometimes it's just hard to keep track of all this shit. And it also feels like I don't know how some of these teams are having any sort of consistency, which I mean, I guess you could argue that Dale Coyne is kind of in the same situation too, because less of them having drama with, trying to get the scrambling to get like the leader circle points and scrapping with the bottom tier teams for that last 20-second spot or whatever it is. But I mean, they also probably don't have as much stability at that team just because it is a revolving door of drivers coming in and out. But it's like, I don't know. I would like to see less of that, even though I don't guarantee that there's going to be any less of that. But I don't know.
Excuse me. Yeah, I agree with this kind of all around. And now to be fair, the terms of the new charter system will kind of fix that. Um, I while I would have a hard time believing that there's not some provision for some kind of extenuating circumstances, where maybe more than that could be required. Granted, I can't really think of a scenario where you would, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's something. Um, so that'll be nice. But I yeah, it's just the less of the chopping and changing, because between the gazillion drivers at McLaren, the gazillion drivers at Dale
Meyer Shank.
Coyne. Yeah, Meyer Shank as well. It's like, so we've had like 3 teams with like a boatload of drivers coming in and out of 1 or 2 cars at that team, the respective teams rather. And it's just like, sweet Christ, can we please stop? So yes, that is another thing. You're absolutely right. I would like to see less of next year. But like I said, the charter will, to a lot of extent, a great extent, will kind of close that door for everybody. So we should see a lot more stability at these teams going forward. But I guess with that, any sort of parting thoughts for the 2024 IndyCar season?
No, I don't think so, unless you have any.
Uh, Good night, good luck, good riddance. With that, we have been your hosts, and thank you so much for listening to another episode of Chicanery. Until next time, everybody.